Today's episode was made possible through the support of Crazy Joe. If you like what you see here and you're interested in helping me make more and better videos, or if you're interested in joining the community and getting involved with all these other weirdos, check out the links below in the description and see how you can get involved in the Patreon and the Discord. Thank you. Hi there guys, I'm Chris Boden and welcome to the shop. We got a quickie. This is just a quick and easy one. I've had people comment in about making cables and stuff like that, like regular power cables, and I think somewhere in the deep, distant past, I did a video on this, but this is kind of an oddball power cable, and I know I've never done one on one of the big Harding connections. And this is the tiniest, weedliest little Harding connection I've ever seen. Isn't that precious? So we're going to do a video, some oddball plugs, and we get to convert this from British or Chinese in this particular case to America, and we get to do it in some weird stuff. We got the Harding connection, and we've got this, which is a 240 volt connection, because I'm setting up power for robots, and I want to get power to robot 2. So to do that, I've got to make up a cable. So I have, this is totally just a brand new extension cord that I just bought with Mr. Kidwell like a week ago, not even, this past weekend. And I'm cutting it up for parts because it works great for generic cord stock, and I needed slightly more than 6 feet. Yeah, just slightly. Otherwise I'd have cut up an IEC cable. But you can buy extension cords. I got this at Home Depot for like 15 bucks, and it's like a 50-foot extension cord. Tons of SJ cord stock, which is fine for what I'm doing. It's like, I don't know, probably 16 gauge by the looks of it. What do you say? All right, so the first thing that I do is we're gonna have to, we'll do the Harding connector first because they're really easy. I'm gonna take about 4 inches of this, and then I'm gonna bend this over really tight after that. And I'm gonna grab just a razor blade, and with really almost no pressure, you bend this really tight, and you're putting a hard strain on the outside curve, and you just roll this across with the lightest of pressure, and you're going to get a slit there, and that slit's white on the inside. And what we're going to do is squeeze this, and that's going to stretch out that plastic, and just you want to have a really sharp razor blade for this, but just the lightest of pressure, and that'll pop. See where it popped? And that's where you stop, because if you don't, you'll nick your wire. So don't cut any deeper in that spot. And then we're going to bend it at the same spot in a different axis, really hard like that. And this will make the wire want to break, and with just the lightest pressure. And you can do this without nicking the conductor. See? And that pink one right there, that'll just break. So you just chase this right the way around the cable, and then line up your 2 ends, and you're awesome. And then a little twist, and the last of it'll break, and then you can pull this right off. Once you break them all, it'll just pull right off the end, like that. Ta-da! So first thing you do is check for nicks and see if you nicked your conductor, and as long as you didn't, you're good to go. If you nick green, it's not a big deal. Green's your ground, white's your neutral, and black's your positive. Now I see I got a little tiny nick on my black, which means I pushed too deep, and that'll happen. If you do this too hard, you push too deep, you do it. And if that happens, there's a really easy way to fix it. You cut it right the fuck off and start over. There's no substitutions on this. If you screw it up like that, you grab another 4 inches and you do it all over again. I'm going to do it up here where I can actually see it now, because I'm trying to do it under the camera and that's kind of hard. So you put a tight bend on it and just ease on across. This is one of those things that it's knacky. You'll get better at it with practice. You ask 50 different old electricians how to strip a wire like this for making a cord, and you'll get 50 different answers. The annoying part is about 90% of them are going to be right in totally different ways. This really is something that you get better at with practice. Everybody really develops their own system for it. This is mine. That doesn't make it the best way. Hell, that don't even make it right. This is just how I learned how to do it, because some crusty old fart taught me how to do it this way. Okay, so we'll pull that off. Now we do a nick check, just to be sure. If there's any nicks, they'll be right down here. You don't have to worry about nicking it way the hell out here. If there's any nicks, it's going to be right down here. But you check it really good and make sure there's no nicks in your wire. And now we have enough. And you do the other end exactly the same as that. All right, now we got two ends, so let's terminate them. So we're going to terminate the first end in our big, sexy, gray Harding connection. That is so cool. So to do this, I'm going to take this all apart so that you can really experience it in all of its glory. So we've got the gland end here on this end, and if you watched episode 8, I think, on the robots, was it 8? You get to learn the basics of these, but it's little fingers with a rubber seal, and this tightens down in there. So we'll put that on. And the way this works is, as this closes, the little fingers bite down on the thing and forms a tight. So even though that hole is huge, and we will slip this up our cable right now. See, that'll ride right up and down the cable. Even though it's huge, it will clamp down tightly on the cable. We're also going to run this up the cable because we can get that out of the way. And do that, even though we could, because both ends of the cable are terminated, do that at this stage of the game. That's important. But here, on the back of this connector, we're going to want, how about yay, will be plenty to get us in there. So we're going to go from there, and we're going to add just a little bit, about 1 centimeter, because the wire actually goes up inside. So that's where we're going to trim it off. Okay. So this is about what you want. And that's about 2 inches, give or take, almost exactly 2 inches. Okay, the grids on the table are 1-inch grids. Comes in super handy. So now we strip this down. And we're going to strip 1 centimeter on each. Okay, so there's our 3 stripped conductors. Now this is in America, so here, black is hot. This is the wire that the electricity comes from the power plant on. This is the hot wire. This is the one that if you touch it, you die. This is white. This is neutral. So electricity from the power plant through your thing back to the power plant on your neutral. And then this is ground. This is the safety conductor, which usually connects to chassis ground or your conduit and a cold water line and a big copper rod in your yard and all kinds of stuff. This is the safety conductor. So hot, neutral, ground. Or if you're working in some electronic stuff in boxes net, you'll see line, neutral, ground. This is the L, this is the N, this is the G. Okay? So on this, the way to open these up is lever this in there and pull it to the back. So we're going to do that for both of these, and that unlocks the cable. Now here we've got the Chinese standard or European standard. It's brown, blue, and then green and yellow. Brown is the color your pants turn when you touch the hot wire. So that is our hot wire. And now that we've moved this out, we can just pull on that and it'll come right out. We can take our black wire, slide it right in there, make sure it seats all the way to the end, and then push this from the top firmly, but don't get nuts. And you'll feel it go chunk, and that locks in position. So we take the blue out, and that's our neutral, and we just make sure you're all tight together. In, all the way down, and make sure to hold it all the way down. with one hand and then align it in with the screwdriver with the other, and we're good there. Tug test for safety, and now we can take this one out. Now to take the ground out, you got to come in from the other side and give it a little lever action. Pull that right out. Spin this down tight, and then slide that right in there. See, this is super easy to do. I love Harding connectors, and so will you, as long as you don't have to buy one, because the prices on them will make you freak out. These are wickedly expensive. They make up for it by being worth it. They're tough as nails. You see them in all kinds of super mission critical, expensive robotics, aerospace, that whole kind of thing. Stuff where people are not afraid to spend money. So to put the bottom on, you'll see there's a threaded hole here. This is a pass-through for that. So you just stick that in there and do that. But don't do that yet, because what you want to do is put the gland end on first, and that'll let you clamp everything down. So we're going to run this all the way down and then screw this together, and you want to screw it at the big nut only. Don't tighten this down yet, just tighten this down, and that's just tighten that down. Okay, so we're going to get this close but not exact. Okay, you want to have it sticking out about that far, just like a centimeter, right? And then grab this with your pinky finger, hold on tight here, make a fist, and then run this down. Now as you do this, I don't know if I'll be able to show this or not. As you run this down, you can see the plastic fingers coming in, and you just tighten the hell out of that. And now that's sealed. That's on there. Okay? But we still got a little 1/4 inch sticking out. So you squeeze this with your thumb, because you want to crush those wires in there just a little bit. You just need like a centimeter. You really don't need a whole lot. And then we're going to run this down. If it gives you any trouble, it's probably because you're not lined up right. Yeah, I'm a little bit too far, so you can actually go past it. And we'll grab the right screwdriver for this. Now you just tighten that down. Don't go nuts on it. Just, and that's how you terminate a Harding connector. That's our power feed for our ABB IRB 120 robot. So now let's do the other end. All right, so for this end of the cable, because it's a different type of thing, it still works very similarly. You have to take your end. Now this end piece works with a clamp, just like on our gland end. The clamp is right there. This is the other half of it. We can set this aside for now. And here's our plug end. Now the plug end goes in the big tubey part on the end, so this goes on the cable thus. What skills! Okay, so now we have brass, green. Green is ground. Green is always ground. You get in a lot of trouble if green isn't ground. So on the back of the plug, you'll have, these are actually screw clamps, and there's 3 of them. So as this tightens down, you'll see the clamp inside move. Yeah. So just make sure all 3 are open. And then we're going to run our ground in. Now, there's a little nub right here at the edge of my thumbnail. See that thumb? Or see that nub? If you have insulations, or if you have bare conductors sticking out of the nub, you strip this off too long. Cut a little bit off. If your insulation is running under the clamp inside, that coppery bit you see, that square, that's the clamp. You'll see them come together. If your insulation's under that, you stripped it too short. Strip off a little bit more. Where you want the line of your insulation to end is right at the edge of the nub. That's the Goldilocks spot. So we're going to put that right there and then tighten that down. Now this is an important rite of passage that all people who work with electrical will come to pass. At some point in doing this, because this really is the way you do it, you will at some point slip and stab yourself in the hand. A way to avoid that will help, is don't use a Phillips head screwdriver for this. use a straight blade screwdriver, because a straight blade does two things. One, for this application, it doesn't cam as easily. And two, if you do stab yourself in the hand, it's a lot sharper and you're more likely to get all the way through. And then you just go to your boss and be like, yo, stigmata. So you can try that. So on here, we've got brass and brass. And for anybody who's ever wired up a plug before, that's kind of weird, because usually it's black to brass and white to silver. But on this, we have two brass conductors. Well, two brass terminals, because this is, remember, these are both hot because it's 240 volts. So this is one of the rare opportunities that you're going to connect a white wire to a brass terminal. Now, for a lot of stuff, you would have to label that with a black piece of tape or something, or get a specific cord that has a black wire and a red wire, usually. I don't know if I've ever seen one with two black wires, but I've seen black and red. But for this application, this will be fine, because I'm a private home user and it's my robot, and I can use any color crayon in the box within reason. And anybody who looks at this who's like an electrical person and looks at, oh, it's 240, okay. Okay. These all go down DIT tight. Okay, so now you've got your end on, and it should look like that. Okay, so now we get our housing back. So this will only go on here one way. It's keyed, and you just line it up, and it's only going to drop in at one spot right there. Okay, so see how we're sticking out a little bit? That's where you want to be, because you're going to have that little bit of crush. So we're going to run this up to here. There's two ribs inside for her pleasure. Well, they put the ribs hitting on the inside. It's for his pleasure. You want to be just beyond the second rib. Put this in position. Run your screws down a little bit. This is so much easier to do in this position. You can look in there and see where your ribs line up. Now, depending on the size cord you use, there's an insert in here that you can take out if you have bigger cable. But for this small stuff, I leave the insert in, because if you don't, it won't crush. And it should actually pinch down and crush the cable a little bit. Okay, so it should look like this at this point. You can see that's down tight on the cable, and if you look in there, you can see that we're just past the clamp, just barely. So that's how it should look. And then this will line up. You'll see the key on the inside, and you'll be able to find the keyed slot on the outside. So you just spin it around, and it'll just drop right in at one point. And you push that all the way down, and now your wires are all the way in there. And then just run the screws down. Now the screws on this are really kind of cool, because they're very, would that be high pitch? The screws, instead of going in like this, go in like the rifling of a barrel. They zip right in. And you don't, they're going to turn pretty easy until they stop, and don't force them. Once they stop, and you'll just strip it out if you go too hard. So there's our finished cable end for a 15 amp, 240 volt power feed. And now I can plug in the second robot. Though robot 1 has been working its little heart out through this whole video, which is pretty cool. This is my robotic cameraman for the day. I'm just dicking around, having fun with it, because if you had a big ass robot sitting on your workbench, wouldn't you do stuff like this? Hell yeah, it's a fun time. So thanks for hanging out with me for a quick one as we learn how to do a Harding connector and a little NEMA connector. So cool. This is a, who made this? Leviton, probably? Leviton makes a lot of good ones. Yeah, it's a Leviton. If you're buying plug ends, like if you've got to like replace a extension cord end or something like that, you can do this. You need a screwdriver, strippers, and cutters. There's nothing to it. Buy Leviton. They make really good ones. There's a lot of really crappy, cheap brands like that clamshell open, especially if you're like Home Depot and stuff like that. They sell a lot of garbage. Buy the good ones. Buy the Levitons. They cost more. They're worth it. Buy the good stuff. You guys have fun. I'm Chris Boden, and as always, we'll see you next time. All right, so on this end, we're going to terminate it with a NEMA 6-15 plug. This one you'll notice they're both horizontal, which is probably pretty weird if you're the average American looking at this. Usually they're two vertical ones. This plug is designed for 240 volts, so it won't plug into a regular wall socket. Like, you can try it, it's not going to work. And in this one, normally in an American wall socket, this side is hot, this is neutral, this is ground. In this plug, these are both hot at 125 volts relative to ground and 240 volts relative to each other, because even though they're only 125 volts, they're out of phase, so you get 240 volts here. So we're going to cut this here. This is actually going to be really short. It's surprising how short the pigtails are in plugs. So you're going to want to be back about there. So we'll say we want 1 inch, okay? And then we want enough to terminate. So we're going to come all the way up to here because these actually stick inside. So about 1.5 inches, give or take. And then we're going to trim those off. Like that. Now strip them back all about 1 centimeter. Ish, give or take. If you strip too much, it's really easy to tell. Also, when you open up the plug, there's probably a piece of paper in there with instructions on how to do this, and it'll give you like little measurements for how far to go. But let's start with ground. So I'm going to open up the clamps really wide on this. So inside the hole is a little clamp, and you can see that open and close. And you actually stick the wire in the clamp. Now when you do this, you'll be able to see it from the outside. Don't put insulation under the clamp, just wire. So if you go too far, if you stripped it too short, you'll end up with insulation under the clamp. Don't have any bare wire out here like that. If you did that, you stripped it too far. If it's just right, your insulation should stop right at this little nub, right here, right at the inside end of the nub. So right where my thumbnail ends, right there. Right where my thumbnail ends is where your insulation should stop. See the nub? So you put the whole wire in there to there. That's too far out, that's too far in. That's the Goldilocks spot. And now I'm going to try and hold all of this on camera. It's really hard to do this on camera. And then tighten down the clamp. And you just finger snug it. Okay. And then you come up, you get a real good look at it and make sure everything's kosher. And then tighten it down. This is the part where most people stab themselves in the hand. If you do this enough, at some point, you're going to stab yourself in the hand. So it goes in there really snug. Do not 200-pound gorilla on the end of that, but really snug. Now, usually, on American Electrical, it's black to brass and white to silver, but these are both brass because they're both hot in this instance. So even our white wire is hot. And if you were doing this in other applications, you would label the white wire with a piece of black tape or something like that. But seeing as how this is just inside a 240 volt outlet, I'm not going to sweat it. Or just inside a 240 volt plug, it's kind of obvious, and I'm not going to sweat it. Though I may be violating the National Electric Code. It's not my first time doing that. All right, so now for our last one, we open this up. You can see the hole there. Drop this in the hole. Fuck! Remember that thing I told you, make sure to do before you do the I didn't. Fuck. Fuck! All right, let's just try that right over, okay? Hey, now I'm an official YouTube certified master electrician. Fuck. I got skills. Don't burn your house down.